We're looking here at the scatterplot portion of a learner assessment report that was generated for a learner who did an online adaptive general numeracy assessment. The scatterplot is used to display the results so that we can get a quick picture of the learner's ability. It's a case of a picture being worth 1,000 words. As with any graph, when we look at a graph, we should be looking for trends and characteristics that we can glean some knowledge from. So for this scatterplot, notice that the black dots represent the questions that the learner answered correctly, and the white dots are the questions that they answered incorrectly. So at a first glance, what can we take from this particular scatter plot here? Notice that the first 3 questions the learner got correct, and then they came unstuck at about question 4, and they missed questions 4 through 10. So that's just an observation at this point. We'll come back and talk about that in a little bit. Overall, they got a bit more than half the questions wrong, a little less than half of them right. And so again, we'll come back in a bit and talk about whether that is significant. And you notice that they got a higher proportion of knowledge questions correct than they did the proportion of number strategies and measurement questions correct. And again, we'll come back to that at this point by point. So let's start with these black and white impressions. Notice that there are 2 scales on the 2 vertical scales on the report. There's a numerical scale score that goes from 0 to 1,000, and then we've got this Koru scale, which if you've looked at the learning progressions, you will see that that's exactly the same as the Korus that sit against the step levels in the progressions. So the little fronds on the Koru represent the numeracy progression step level. So this is a step 2, step 3, step 4, and so on. For our purposes about finding out what next steps, what next teaching steps might be for a learner, this Koru step level scale is the one of most interest. Right, so the questions, you'll notice, are shown in relation to these vertical scales. So the questions on the assessment are related to a step level, and the questions are located so that it's expected that somebody operating at a particular level will get about 70% of the questions right, or there's a 70% probability that they'll get a question at that level right. So in this image here, for example, question 1 is sitting at step 4, and so it's expected that a learner who's operating at step 4 has a good chance of getting that correct. It's unlikely that a learner who's at step 3 would get that question correct. And for question 2, sitting up at step 6, it's unlikely that somebody sitting at step 3 or 4 would answer that question correctly. So the questions are located on the scale, and then the learner is located on the scale. It's important to note that that's a gross generalization, that nobody we can't say that nobody at step 2 would get a step 4 question right, and that's the reason why it takes about 30 questions to determine a learner's level. Okay, so it's quite probable that a step 3 learner will get some of the step 4 questions right, but we're looking for the overall ability of the learner. Okay, so going back to this numeracy report, As I mentioned, this is an adaptive assessment, which means that each question on the assessment is generated based on the response to the previous question. So the first question here starts out at step 3, which is typical for an adaptive assessment. That's in the middle of the progression, and the learner got that question right. So the next question was pegged at a little bit higher level. They got that one right, and so the tool will say, oh, that's good, we'll ask a little bit harder question. And then you see when they came unstuck at question 4, that was a bit higher level again. And so then the tool said, oh, we've hit the ceiling here. The next question will make a little bit easier. Okay, and so that's the adaptive nature of this assessment. And that's one of the major reasons why the tool doesn't allow learners to skip questions, because in an adaptive assessment, of course, it has to have a result so that it can peg the next question accordingly. The adaptive nature of these assessments give rise to 2 very important notions that you need to address with your learners to get them ready to sit an assessment. Our learners are used to doing assessments where we're checking whether what we taught them actually went in. In other words, they and us are expecting them to know most of the answers. This is a diagnostic assessment, and it's trying to do something completely different. It's looking for what they do know. It's also looking for what they don't know, at what level is their ceiling of knowledge. And so before you set your learner down to do an assessment, you should make sure that they know that it's going to feel like this assessment is getting more difficult as they go along. And that's going to be the case no matter which step level they're operating at, okay? Because if somebody's sitting at step 4, the assessment tool is going to ask questions at step 4 and at step 5, so it's still going to feel like it's getting harder. And the same thing is going to happen if somebody's operating at step 2. The questions at step 3 are going to feel harder for them. So they need to know that going into it, that if it feels like it's getting harder, that's a good thing, because they're getting some questions right. And then after the learner sits the assessment, some debriefing, make sure that they know that it's quite common for learners to get half or more of the questions wrong. Because again, the purpose of the assessment is to find out what learners do and don't know. So they need to, we need to just make them feel comfortable that it's quite okay not to get 100% on these assessments, and that we expect that there will be quite a few questions answered incorrectly. Okay. Now, so we've got, just pointing out here that this was a general numeracy assessment, and so it assesses all of the number strategies, the additive, the multiplicative, and the proportional reasoning strategies, and also the measurement progression from the measurement interpret space strand of the progressions. And over on this side, it are the questions pertaining to the number knowledge progressions. So there is the place value, the number sequencing, and the number facts progression. This fact that the learner got a greater proportion of the number knowledge questions correct is probably quite common in the numeracy assessment, because the number knowledge supports the number strategies. So it's quite common that, in other words, in order to operate at step 4 of the number strategies, a learner really has to have all of the number knowledge, most of the number knowledge in place up to step 4. So again, not unusual that you would get a number knowledge more black dots than overall than you do in the number strategies side of the assessment. Okay, so if we now, so that was a numeracy assessment. If we look now at a reading report, and again notice that it's a general reading report, and so it assesses 4 of the 5 progressions within the Read with Understanding strand of the adult progression. So vocabulary and language, text features, comprehension, and reading critically are all assessed. As is common, this assessment started, the question number 1 was at about step 3, and again, this is adaptive assessment. The learner got that question wrong, and so the tool said, oh, that's too hard, let's go down and ask an easier question. The learner got that one correct, and so it bounced back up there, and there's question 3 there, okay? So when you're looking at these, trying to make generalizations, notice that the questions don't go sequentially from left to right, 1 to 3. They jump around because the tool will assess a bit of comprehension and then go over to the vocabulary and then over to reading critically. It bounces around a bit. This learner pretty consistently answers questions in the lower and mid part of step 3, so it's probably not surprising that their overall score came out at step 3. Reading critically is proportionately a little bit worse than comprehension, and again, that's probably not unsurprising, or it's probably not surprising, because the reading critically, of course, requires that you actually comprehend the material that you're reading, so it is a bit higher level skill. So we will look, you'll notice that there's a scale score on the assessment as well. The next section of this module will look at interpreting that scale score, what it means, and what we can take out from that, and also we'll look at how the learner is located on the report.